Blessings, good evening. Tonight we chanted the Metta Sutta, the Buddha's words on loving kindness. As we know, the word metta really means unconditional love, or love without attachment. So it's the kind of love we aspire to in our spiritual practice. Because, as the Buddha pointed out, anywhere where we attach, we will suffer. So that even includes when we practice kindness. Kindness, when not backed up by the practice of mindfulness and wisdom and right understanding, means that we can attach to whoever we're being kind to, or the feeling of kindness, metta, with a sense of self, so it can still be a cause of suffering. So this is something we have to contemplate in our practice, where even something as good and as powerful and helpful to us as the practice of metta, goodwill, kindness, can still be a cause for suffering if we're not careful. One of the qualities of someone who's practicing metta, following the Buddha's teaching, is, as we just chanted, they have to make themselves easy to teach. And that's a quality our teacher, Luang Por Chah, really emphasized. Because of course, if we're difficult to teach, then it's hard to progress in our understanding of the Dhamma. One big part of learning the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma that the Buddha taught, is in bringing it into your thinking, the way you view the world. So if you're not easy to teach, then you may reject the Buddha's teaching straight away without even having tested them or found out about them, put them into practice. And that's quite common. People may have their own view on things and come in contact with the Buddhist teachings, straight away dismiss them, but not dismiss them out of wisdom or understanding, but just because they don't like them or don't agree with them. So this quality of making oneself easy to teach, Ajahn Chah encouraged, because developing that ability to look at things, observe things and know things, while keeping one's mind maybe open or in the middle before we come to a firm decision perhaps in what we're involved with, what we're looking at, what we're trying to understand. Even in Buddhism we have the concept of good karma, bad karma. Really these are impersonal things, impersonal qualities. There are human beings who make karma, some good karma, some bad karma. But karma itself just means intentional action. But we tend to attach to things when we're not clear in our mind and we don't yet fully understand the path out of suffering. And so even something like karma we can attach to with a sense of self, my karma, my good karma, my bad karma. One of the things that feeds attachment is conceit, kind of arises together with attachment. It's another side of attachment. Conceit, self-view, self-regard. So sometimes we believe ourselves to be a certain way. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm high, I'm low, I'm the best, I'm the worst, I'm the same as. So again, contemplating this quality of being easy to teach helps us to understand better maybe where our suffering in life comes from. We grasp onto ideas of who we are, and then that's usually what comes up when we're more stubborn or obstinate in a situation. If we're not willing to learn or we're not easy to teach, then we'll be the opposite. We'll tend to be full of ourselves. I know, I'm right. So one of the things you learn in a Buddhist monastery is how to be easy to teach. It doesn't mean to say you know everything. It's more an attitude of being one who's willing to learn from experience. And Ajahn Chah used to point out that when you're looking and learning from things, you're in a much better position as a human being, because even if you make mistakes or you experience some pain or suffering, if you're looking to learn or turn it into a teaching, then even something unpleasant, unwanted, undesirable can still give you something, give you some benefit. And we learn from mistakes, we learn from painful experiences, maybe. We don't want to repeat them. But if we're not willing to learn, we're not easy to teach, then of course it blocks us off from the world. We often, without realizing it, become quite self-centered, selfish, difficult to live with. And monastic life is based on community, whether you're just one or two monks or nuns together, or many monks and nuns. You have to be able to let go of some of your conceit, your attachment to views and so on, in order to be at peace in a community. It's the same in the workplace, family life as well. Living in a neighborhood, in a village or somewhere. We have to learn how to get on with other people. It's part of life. So being easy to teach sometimes means being receptive, open to other people's views, opinions, ideas, not holding to one's own ideas so tightly that one can't at least listen to others. Doesn't mean to say you have to agree, but at least being open. In the time of the Buddha, there was one monk who couldn't live anywhere because he was so unteachable. He always thought he was right and knew best. It's called Venerable Dhammika. And they kept asking him to leave monasteries because he was just so full of his own opinions and his pride and his conceit that he wouldn't listen to any kind of instruction or admonition. Even if everyone around him could see he was breaking a rule or doing something sort of very unwholesome, unskillful, he wouldn't admit it, and he wouldn't let anyone tell him otherwise. He knew best. So he kept having to be asked to leave monasteries. Some people are like that. They just have to move from place to place because they're not easy to teach. The opposite is somebody who appreciates teachers and teachings, and they open their mind. Then you welcome even hard teachings. Some teachings are hard, aren't they? If somebody points out your fault, where you've made a mistake, is sometimes we don't like to hear it, but it's useful for us. Venerable Sariputta was always praised for being appreciative of his teachers and the teachings he received. His first teacher was one of the first enlightened monks, Venerable Assaji. He was a very kind monk, Venerable Assaji. He was one of the group of first five disciples of the Buddha. And he was the last of them to become enlightened, because after the Buddha began teaching with his first teaching, the Dhammacakka Sutta, he was teaching this group of five, and they were living together, but they still needed to eat, and so some of them would go out to collect alms food into the village every day and leave the others to practice and meditate and listen to the Buddha. The others got enlightened first because Assaji was doing that duty, that service for them, going out collecting food, bringing it back for the others. But he did become enlightened eventually, and then he was a very inspiring monk. The way he walked was peaceful, composed, clearly very mindful. And Sariputta, before he was a monk, before he was a disciple of the Buddha, he saw Assaji walking through the village, could see that he was a very mindful person, so he was intrigued and inspired and went and asked for a teaching. Gave him the teaching. Assaji gave him the teaching that all things that arise from a cause, the Buddha has explained what the cause is. When that cause passes, those things pass away. So basically everything that arises must pass away. Everything is impermanent. And that was enough for Sariputta to attain the first stage of enlightenment, stream winner. But after that he was very grateful to Assaji for having passed on this teaching from the Buddha. Assaji himself said, "I'm not the teacher, I'm just the student, but this is what the teacher says." So after that, wherever Sariputta went, whether it's in the forest or in the monastery, when he went to bed, lay down, he'd always think where his teacher was, which direction, to the north, the south, the east, the west. He'd lie down with his head towards the direction where his teacher was, out of respect, out of gratitude and respect for the teacher, the one who showed him how to practice, first of all. He even received criticism for that. Other monks saw him and said, "Well, Sariputta, how can he be like that? He's supposed to be so wise and enlightened, and yet he's always attaching to which direction he puts his head in at night." So the Buddha had him explain to the Sangha why he did that. He said, out of respect and gratitude to Venerable Assaji. Because in India in those days, there were some people whose practice was to bow to the different directions of the compass in a kind of superstitious way. He said, "No, it's just a form of recollection, recollecting my teacher and the good qualities of my teacher." And the Buddha agreed. He said, "Oh, your teacher has done you a great service. He explained the Dhamma to you, inspired you. And people who do great service are very special, and we should respect them." He said, "There's three kinds of people who give us great service. It's the ones who bring us to have faith or inspiration, confidence in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. Especially if you've had no exposure to the Buddhist teachings before, then they do you a great service. It could be just a book. You read a Dhamma book and that inspires you enough to want to learn more, practice more. Or it could be a Dhamma teacher that you meet, talk to, or just see. Like Venerable Sariputta, he just saw Venerable Assaji and faith arose. Or maybe you hear a talk or hear some explanation to the point where you gain some real confidence in the Buddha and his teachings. So that person, whoever it was, has done you a great service. Another person who does you great service is one who explains the teachings further, like the Four Noble Truths. Explain to you how to understand suffering, explain what its cause is and how to abandon the cause, explain the cessation of suffering and the path of practice that will lead you to the cessation or the end of suffering. That person does you a great service. And the person who actually realizes the Dhamma frees themselves from their own defilements, greed, anger, delusion, purifies their mind, develops clear insight into the way things are. They do a service. They verify for the rest of the world that these teachings work. And if they can be an example and explain to you how to realize the Dhamma, they're doing you a great service. If one's not easy to teach, then of course these three kinds of service will not make much, won't give you much value, won't be so relevant to you. If you have so much conceit, you think you know it all, you don't need anyone else, well, you're not going to see the value of Dhamma or Dhamma teachers. When we tend to become harder to teach is when we focus more on worldly success, which is the nature of society, people in general. We're all looking for more material wealth, gains, fortune. We all want praise and reputation. We all want status, power, influence. And we all want different kinds of happiness, what we call sensual happiness, sensual pleasure. These are what the ordinary person seeks and values. And of course, if you're spending all your time seeking these different kinds of success on the mundane level, the worldly level, you probably won't give much value to the Dhamma or Dhamma teachers or the teachings. But what lasts longer? Worldly success is very fragile, very ephemeral, very temporary. As we say, up and down, up and down. You have money and then you spend it or you lose it. You're praised and then you're blamed. You have status and you lose it. You gain some pleasure and then it's replaced by some pain, discomfort. That's the nature of worldly existence, isn't it? Up and down, or the changing conditions of life. Not so reliable. And yet we spend all our effort seeking them. But what provides us with real service, real benefit in the world is Dhamma teachers. Those who point us to the Dhamma, those who explain the Dhamma, those who realize the Dhamma. They're more valuable. The mind of one who's understood the Dhamma is more reliable. It's not affected by the worldly dhammas, praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, status, loss of status. It's not affected by those ups and downs and changing experiences. Ajahn Chah compared his mind to the bridge over the river Moon in Ubon city where he lives. A bridge over a river just stays the same, doesn't it? Whether the river is in flood, which it does sometimes, breaks its banks and becomes the level of the water goes really high, or whether there's a drought and the river shrinks right down to a stream, the bridge is the same. It's like one who practices the Dhamma, understands the Dhamma. It's like one with mindfulness. With mindfulness, there's an evenness of mind. The quality of mindfulness is not shaken or ruffled by the conditions of the world. If you're truly mindful, then you can know gain and loss, and they provide you with equal insight and understanding, because they both have one thing in common: is they're both impermanent. Life is not all gain and it's not all loss either. It's not all pleasure, not all pain, not all praise, not all blame. As you practice mindfulness and you can reflect on these things, you realize that's just the way it is. The conditions of the world come up and pass away again. And it's the mindfulness that keeps you centered or balanced in the middle of the ups and downs of life. So anyone who gives you mindfulness or inspires you to practice mindfulness, again, they're giving you a great service. And the Buddha pointed out, when you live with someone who's mindful, some of that will rub off on you. How much depends on you. If you make yourself easy to teach, then maybe a lot will rub off on you. No one can make you absolutely mindful all the time. You have to practice, you have to want to practice as well. But if you're living with people or meeting people who practice mindfulness, then you get a very good example. Because you start to see yourself when someone else is mindful and you're not. You notice that. Why are they're not getting flustered? Why am I getting flustered? Why are they not getting angry? Why am I getting angry? Why are they not sad when I'm sad? Why are they getting lost in their desire? Why are they not getting lost in their desires when I'm getting lost in my desires? And they give a mirror to you. Sometimes they can advise you, instruct you. Sometimes they just do it through example. This is what people found with living with Ajahn Chah was so beneficial, because he's always mindful. Doesn't mean to say they liked everything he said or did, but they could see he was mindful whatever he was doing. And that's the greatest gift, greatest service to other human beings, because we know what it's like when we're not mindful and when other people are not mindful. And that's when the world starts getting chaotic, full of conflict, full of uncertainty. Making yourself easy to teach doesn't necessarily mean you always have to kind of humble yourself and present an image of being somebody who knows nothing. But at the same time, you have to be willing to learn, even if maybe you're the teacher. Ajahn Chah used to say, if you're the teacher, you still have to teach yourself as well as others. You make everything into something that you learn from. And when you're learning, you notice your mind is brighter, more energetic. When we stop learning, we tend to become very mentally tired and just get caught up into our negative emotions and reactions to things. So these are just a few reflections on teaching and learning tonight. I'll leave them with you, and we'll end here tonight.